This session was recorded June 14th, 2025. Greg and I are discussing the principles of quantum consciousness, specifically to shape and use your inner awareness, the focus of your mind, to achieve your goals, heal your life, and create more of the life that you want.
And then getting more into topics.
Well, it's a good question, I think. What can you create? Because we tend to think that we can create physical things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, we can. But really, what we can create is opportunities. So, for example, I can choose to flip a coin, or I can choose to buy a lottery ticket. That's a physical result, right? Like I could leave right now, walk to the local department store or grocery store, and buy a lottery ticket. And so, what I'm creating there is an opportunity to win. Now, of course, to win a lottery, the odds are something like 35 million to 1, so that's not a very likely result, but I can create an opportunity, right? And that's what you do every time you pick up your phone or talk to a potential client. You create an opportunity to get a win there. And so that's important to realize, because we tend to forget. We say, I want to create this situation here, like a sale in your case, and of course, if you don't do it, then you're going to be bummed out. But what actually creates the result, the physical result, is a combination of factors. Then there could be 100 different things, and so you can't control those. You can't control those. So all you can do is, practice and hopefully you get better at it as you gain experience. I was watching the US Open golf tournament. It's on right now. But I was watching it this morning, and Gary Koch, who is a professional golfer. Now he's on the senior tour, but he's a commentator for the tournament, right?
Okay.
And he says, what you really want is an opportunity to putt for a birdie. In other words, that's what you're trying to create. You're trying to give yourself an opportunity to putt for a birdie. And of course, you can create the opportunity and miss the birdie. And as a matter of fact, you can miss the par putt and end up with a bogey, right? So what you're trying now, of course, what you're trying to do is you're trying to win the tournament ultimately, but at least, the short-term goal every time you hit the ball, essentially, well, I guess when you hit the drive, you want to land in the right place in the fairway. That's the goal. But again, it's an opportunity, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to create an opportunity to get onto the green with your next shot, let's say, if it's a par 4. Right? And then when you hit the second shot, then what you're trying to do is land on the green in a position where you can make a birdie. And, the more you practice and the better you get, then, the more likely you are to do that. And then if you do create an opportunity for a birdie, then you try and get the birdie. But of course, getting a birdie is not easy either. And you may miss it. But with any luck, you get close enough so that you can make a par. So, but I thought that was a good line, that he said, what we're trying to do is create an opportunity to putt for a birdie. So again,
I love it. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So what you're trying to do is create an opportunity for yourself. And then hopefully more of them are going to work out than not, and you're going to end up with a win, right? But it was interesting because one of the things that they showed was this guy who had to finish off his round this morning. for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it rained last night or what happened, but anyway, the guy had to finish off, I think, one hole this morning. I don't know how many holes. They just showed a little clip of this guy, and so he had this putt to make the cut, right? And it was about a 15-foot, maybe a 20-foot putt or something. It was a pretty substantial putt. And his wife was on the bag. She was holding his clubs for him. She was acting as his caddy, right? Young guy, 27 years old or something. And anyway, he made this putt, right? And so he made the cut, and so he's playing today. And as it turned out, there's an odd number of players who made the cut. So he's actually playing by himself. So even though he made the cut, here he is, playing the U.S. Open by himself, right?
Right.
So I wondered, well, how much money did he make by making the cut? Well, do you know how much you earn if you make the cut?
Oh, I have no idea. 250 grand? I know. That's
not that much.
Pretty high.
But on this particular one, he earned just about $41,000 US, right? Which is around 50,000 or 60,000 or something Canadian. So pretty substantial win there. So
sure.
I mean, when he made the putt, his wife and him jumped up and hugged and kissed and celebrated. That's why I was wondering, what did he win by making the cut? So I mean, if he makes the cut and he comes last, and he's 10 over par at the moment, so and the leader is like I think he's 5 under, so there's 15 shots. So the chances of him winning the tournament are virtually none. But nevertheless, he still made 41,000 because he made the cut. So there's a great win. I mean, that's a win for him. It would be a win for anybody really to make the cut. You paid your expenses, paid a lot of your expenses, right? So I thought that was cool. So it's a good thing to keep in mind that what you're trying to do with all your goal setting and everything is you're trying to number one, create an opportunity, and create an opportunity for a win, for like a bigger win, right? And and sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. You really can't control the result. The better you get at whatever it is you're doing, then the closer and closer you can get to having those opportunities pay off every single time. But chances are they won't pay off every single time. So that's I think that's a good way to think about it, because we can easily get down on ourselves if what we're trying to do doesn't work out. Well, the thing is, you can't control what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's even flipping a coin, the chances are only 50-50 if it's going to be a head or a tail. And sometimes it's neither. Sometimes you flip the coin and it goes down a crack in the sofa and you can't even find it. It's like, whoops.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I like that. That's a good saying. Maybe I'll make a little theme of that for the putt for a birdie this week or something as I'm working and doing some of my things. I was, I think the last month or so here, I've been looking at some of the NLP ideas due to your introduction to me of Grinder, and I'm sure the other guy's name escapes me, but Binder or
Bandler.
Oh, Bandler. This is.
Yeah.
And so they, I think that we magnify and delete and generalize all the time. So we're really noticing only certain parts of conversations or different things because our mind is moving around in inner space. It really matters the way we're looking at things. I think there's a pattern of, our reality is what we're allowing it to be. So we create, and the more you get control of that, I think the more pleasant your day can be, and the more, more effective you can be. I think instead of thinking right or wrong, think effective. What's an effective way to move me forward in my goals, or, and I think that, so it's kind of, another little segue or segment that, and adding to your kind of workbook. I've been trying to use the workbook more diligently. I've been doing it so long that there's so much content in it that I've been trying to figure out how to synthesize where I, have maybe some things in each category that I'm working on at a given time.
Right.
And trying to maintain my motivation and attitude on each of those things, and then trying to have my goals set and maybe those priorities. So, kind of coming up with a prioritization planning system that gets summarized into every day, because there's little pieces of each project done to move those all ahead. And so, I mean, I could be having progress in, family areas, and then all of a sudden travel areas and financial areas, and, my taxes were coming back for my CPA, and working on that. Meanwhile, working on retirement planning, all these different things, like, kids going to college, one going in, one coming out. I mean, all these different facets that you're trying to do, but when you're trying to motivate, or modulate your attitude about them and keep it positive, keep it where you're putting yourself into high probability of having success in that area, is key. Because I mean, it's a little weird when you have two, we have control of the inner world and the outer world now. They're related. I mean, the inner world will empower a lot of the outer world to be more probable if you pick the right decisions, right? And your inner, likewise, the decisions on your inner world. So, it's a weird thing once you feel like you've got some control of it. Now you have to do it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I'm giving a talk in October to this class of university students on consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been working on that presentation. And so one of the things that I am thinking I'll talk about is the inner awareness, right? Now I talk about this in, I think it's chapter 10 in the book, but so your inner awareness is your ability to perceive the inner world, right? If you think of it as a picture,
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the examples I'm using is, for example, if I asked you to think about your car, visualize your car. Well, you get a visual impression of your car. But one of the qualities of your inner awareness is that you can shift the focus of it. So, for example, if I ask you to, imagine that you're walking toward your car in a parking lot, and you're 50 yards away. So you can see the whole car there, but you can also see a whole bunch of other cars and some people and shopping carts and, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So you can see your car, but it's not very detailed, But now if you imagine that you're standing next to your car, and you're going to open the trunk of the car and you look at your left tail light, now you're focusing on your left tail light. And if you realize, oh, hey, there's a fly sitting there, so you narrow your focus right down. So you're looking at that fly. And if you had a magnifying glass, you could look at that fly, and theoretically you could focus on one of the fly's wings or one of the veins on the fly's wing,
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can do that with your inner awareness too. Like if I ask you, for example, if I ask you, how was your week last week on a scale of 10, what kind of a week did you have last week? Well, you take in the whole 7 days in one shot, and you might say, it was a 6 out of 10, or maybe an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. It was a good week, But you're taking the whole week. You're taking 7 days at one shot, kind of like looking at your car across the other side of the parking lot, right?
Right.
But if I say to you, remember having breakfast one day, well, you might remember, okay, I remember eating breakfast one day, at home, right? And now remember what you ate. Well, you might remember, oh, I ate a piece of toast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, narrow your focus down to remember the moment that you took a bite of that toast. So you can maybe remember, oh, putting that toast in your mouth and crunching it, you can remember the taste of it and the texture of it. Well, that's the same idea as you're focusing the focus of your inner awareness. You're focusing it right down to one moment when you are taking a bite of toast. And so this idea that you can change the focus of your inner awareness, that's one of the qualities of the inner awareness, right? You can shift the focus of it. And one of the other qualities is you can add filters to what you're picking up. Like if I ask you, remember the texture of the toast. Well, you get a sense of how it feels in your mouth, right? When you're chewing the toast. So that's a specific thing. Or if I ask you, remember what the weather was that day. Well, you might be able to remember, oh, it was a Saturday, it was sunny, I was sitting outside with my wife and, having breakfast on the patio. You can remember, oh, it was sunny that morning, right? Well, that's another bit of information. So in other words, what I'm saying is your inner awareness is sort of infinitely variable. You can choose the size of the picture or the size of the frame, and you can choose the content of it. Am I looking at the fly's wing or am I looking at the whole car in the parking lot? Different information comes in, right? And the information that you're getting by doing this is creating the meaning of it. So whatever information you're getting from you can call this a visualization exercise or a memory exercise or something like that. But with the information that you're getting depends on the questions that you ask. What would you see if you were looking at the wing of a fly sitting on the left turn signal of your car in a parking lot? That's a very specific kind of a question. So in terms of like setting your goals and planning your day, planning your week, planning your year, you really have to realize that you can shift your awareness in all those different modalities, right? You can be looking at the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, or the olfactory. What did the toast smell like? What did it taste like? What was the weather outside? How were you feeling that day? Were you in a good mood or a bad mood? You might remember, oh yeah, I was kind of upset because something happened the day before and I was thinking about it, so I was kind of in a bad mood that morning. So depending on the questions that you're asking yourself, you can get different information from whatever you're thinking about, at least in theory. You may not be able to remember it all, but you might be able to remember it. You can certainly remember more of it as you think about it. And so one of the things that Paul Meyer says is that if you're not achieving the goals to the degree that you want, it's because they're not clearly enough defined. And so to shift analogies again, when I was planning that trip to England, the first thing that I was thinking about was, when are we going to go and where are we going to land? What kind of hotel are we going to stay in? Where are we going to stay in London? And then I shifted the question to, wouldn't it be great if because it was doing a talk there, if I had a talk set up? Well, then the question became, okay, how can I organize a talk? How can I meet somebody that could theoretically organize an audience for me? That was a whole different set of questions, right? But then when I managed to do that, then the question became, okay, well, I have this talk organized in Bournemouth. I think if I remember correctly, it was the 2nd of May, 7:00 at night. So then the question became, how do I get there? What train do I have to catch? And when do I catch the train? And how do I catch the train from London? How much is the ticket? Do I save money if I buy a ticket in advance or, whatever? So like thinking about that trip, the shift, the focus of my awareness as I was thinking about the trip became, where am I going to go in England? what day am I going to go, or how long am I going to be there? What do I want to visit? One place I wanted to visit was the house that I was raised in when I was a kid. So, I figured out how to get there and all that sort of stuff. So, in other words, in terms of what Paul Meyer said, there's more and more and more detail that I had to think about at every stage of the process, from when are we going to go, where are we going to go, to what train are we going to catch, and what hotel are we going to stay in Bournemouth on the 2nd of May, and how do I get there? Where's the train station? How do I get from the train station to the hotel? That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's almost no limit, or I guess I could say there is no limit. There's an infinitely variable possibility of information that you can get from any particular strategy, any particular goal that you want to achieve. And of course, when it starts to work for you, when you figure out what works, whether it's, catching a train or a plane or making a sales call, then you want to make sure that you do it again if it works. You get the result you want, so you want to duplicate your behavior. And if it doesn't work, then you want to, change your behavior a little bit. So there's virtually no, well, never mind virtually, I would say
Right.
there is no limit theoretically to the amount of information that you can glean from thinking about your past, thinking about your future, deciding on your goals. And your scope can
be as wide as you want, as narrow as you want, with any number of filters that you want. Join us in this online community for $1 a day. You get your own PDF copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based. 2 powerful meditation recordings, this Design Your Life workbook, and a 4-hour video course that tells you how to use it to change your life step by step. Go to learntodesignyourlife.com.